Thanks for having me. I see gathered here today, we've got teachers, administrators, students, parents, friends, some amazingly talented artists, and we're all here today to talk about creativity. Kind of impressive that we've got full room on a Saturday afternoon to talk about creativity, I'm just going to say. My job here is to talk about creativity in education. How do we light that creative spark in our students? How do we fuel and build the fires of their creativity without stomping on them, while still maintaining the appropriate rigor necessary to help them flourish? Now, the journey we're going to take today, you and I, is a bit of a winding path to find out what I believe about education and creativity. So let us journey together, you and I. That's me with my little pack as we head out on this pathway. And as an educator, I want to tell you that I have often found that the best educative moments come from stories. And so, got my prop handy, it is to stories that we will turn to begin to answer this question about creativity in education. For I know a child, a girl child, feisty, never meek nor mild. She is spunky and full of spark, ready to make her mark on this big world of ours. But she is subject to higher powers. Media, society, and TV tell this little girl what she can and cannot be. So soon she dreams of princesses and long flowing dresses. And I see for me a role in helping her to be free. I am an educator and a friend, a teacher to the very end. Now, what is it that media is telling young boys and girls? I've got some startling statistics for you. Actually, they're startling to me. In family films, so these are films that kids are watching. For every 3 males shown on screen, there's only 1 female. 4 out of every 5 narrators of kids' movies, family films, are male. And media researchers Stacy Smith and Crystal Cook tell us that in family films, females are 5 times more likely than male characters to be shown in sexually revealing clothing. And that a quarter of all of these female characters have midsections shrunken so small that they can't actually fit any internal organs. So for me, I see that it is imperative to help young girls and boys to be able to see and interpret the world in which they live, the world that is saturated by media, because I know a child, a girl child, feisty, never meek nor mild, and it is my job to help her to be free, to help her to think so that she can be smart and pretty in pink. I must help her to see beyond what inhibits so that she can transcend silly gendered limits. Because I am an educator and a friend, a teacher to the very end. And I believe that knowledge is power, and that as educators, if we can empower our students to be able to analyze the rhetorical strategies and to develop the critical thinking skills to evaluate the world around them, then they won't be squashed by what media, TV, movies are telling them. But in fact, they'll be able to resist those stereotypes. They'll be able to challenge them. They'll be able to break them. And they will be able to bend and mold them. And in so doing, they will unleash their own creative and critical faculties. Because I know a child, a boy child, an athlete, always running wild. He can never sit still, even as his mother tries to drill him in his math. His heart is out the door and down the path. His teachers scold and nag, but he has no words to say. I learn best when I play. And so he begins to feel sad, as though there's something in him that is bad. And as an educator, I am full of concern for how best to help this boy to learn. For I know a child, a boy child, an athlete, always, always running wild. Educational theorist Howard Gardner popularized the notion about multiple intelligences, essentially that students learn in different ways. And one of those intelligence he called bodily kinesthetic. So essentially that there are some learners who learn through their bodies. They learn best through movement. Educationists Michael Gurian and Kathy Stevens advise using project-based strategies in the classroom to help students to learn by moving their bodies, and they do so in response to some interesting facts out of the US. In the US, 80% of all D's and F's given are given to boys. 90% of classroom discipline problems are due to boys. And 70% of all high school dropouts are boys. So as an educator, I can't help but ask, how do we get our boys involved and engaged in learning? And it's not just boys who need to pay attention to their bodies in classrooms, but it is boys who I am concerned about because I know a child, a boy child, an athlete, always, always running wild, and it is my job to help him to not feel dumb, or worse yet, just numb. I want him to be able to run and play each and every day. I am an educator and a friend, a teacher to the very end. Now this link, not just for boys, but for all learners between the mind and the body is an important one. Christopher McDougall's best-selling book, Born to Run, makes this absolutely explicit when he ties our human capacity for endurance running to our brain's higher capacity for higher learning and higher functioning. And so for me, I see a link between the mind and the body. And that if we can connect our students' intellectual capacities with their bodies, then we are educating whole children. We are teaching them completely. And in teaching students completely, we must not forget what is inside. For I know another child, a girl child, an artiste, beyond compare. She draws monsters and beasts from thin air. This child sees the world differently from you or me. Her mind sees patterns of connections always in 3D. Her teachers tell her to draw something nice, but she is stubborn and she follows no advice. The world tells her that she is odd and strange, and perhaps she should change. And as an educator, I want to encourage her art, but I know that natural talent is just a start. I know this child, an artiste beyond compare, who draws monsters and beasts out of thin air. And I'll let you in on a little secret here. This art, and all of the slides I'm showing you today, were drawn by a girl who's 9 years old. Now, she would draw them with her pen, not even with a pencil, with a pen, creatures of her imagination, and then she would tell her mom how to paint it in, directing her which colors to go where. And it's important to note that for students who study art, they're 4 times as likely to be recognized for academic achievement than those who don't. In countries where arts education is mandatory, these countries are they rank consistently highest for math and science scores. Yet the US spends only 5% of 5% of its budget on arts and humanities education is what they spend on math and science. So for me, I can't help but want to create spaces for our students to find and tap into their inner artists. Because I know a child, an artiste beyond compare. I don't want to see her squash what makes her unique, simply because some people think that children shouldn't speak, but sit and be quiet, when clearly this child's mind and art are a riot. I am an educator and a friend, a teacher to the very end. I believe in the art for art's sake argument, so art is valuable in and of itself. It's an end unto itself. But I also believe that art can be used as a tool that leads us to other successful educational outcomes and achievements. So I want us to be able in classrooms to help our students to tap into their artistic ability so that they can light that creative spark. Because I know children who grow into men, and I know children who grow into women, and they sit in university classes and stare, sometimes off into space or out into the open air, and when I ask them what they think, they stare at me in terror, afraid to blink. They know how to sit still and take notes and return back to me what I say to them in quotes. But when I ask them to formulate a logical critique, the rules of what I require seem rather oblique. They do not know how to weigh the facts. I do not think they are merely being lax. They are filled with unease to find that university writing is not a breeze. They sit and stare at blank screens, not knowing what to write, it seems, and I fear that if they know not the form their essay must take, their critical and creative faculties will never awake. Because I know children who grow into men, and I know children who grow into women. In university, over 60% of students are enrolled in classes where there's a reasonable expectation that they're going to have to write academic essays as evidence of their ability to produce sophisticated material appropriate to their courses. Yet there's a proliferation of research to suggest that university-level students are underprepared for these demands of academic writing. So students sit, stare at their blank screen, an essay to write, sweat begins to appear on their brow as they are filled with anxiety and stress, neither emotion which is particularly conducive to producing coherent, creative, or critical prose. And I know children who grow into men, and I know children who grow into women, and it's not their fault that they've not been taught how to structure a logically progressing thought. And so I've co-created a tool called EssayJack to help compensate for what they might lack. It gives them the basic scaffolding and form for which an academic essay must conform. It gives them confidence as they help to build their draft so that they can find nuance as they hone their craft. I am an educator and a friend, a teacher to the very end. It is important, and we heard this from the last very good talk, it is important to be able to give students the tools and the skills to create the appropriate framework and structure. For only then can they break free out of that structure and unleash their full creative and critical potential. Now, when I was an English educator, I used to tell my students, look, when you are gone from my class and years down the road, you are off living your life, I don't mind if you forget the plot or theme of Hamlet. But if you can't analyze the world around you, if you can't pick apart an ad, if you can't participate in politics, if you can't engage in society, then I think I'll have failed you. So in all of these stories, be it being able to analyze media and embrace knowledge as power, whether it is combining the mind and the body through sports and academics, through unleashing an inner creative artist, or by knowing the skills and tools for appropriate scholarly communication. I think as educators, we have this tremendous privilege to help students to light the fires of their own critical and creative sparks. And if we can do that, not only will they warm themselves for the rest of their lives, but they will then be able to share that spark and let it burn into a fire that will jump from one to the next to the next. And that is a brightness and a power that I long to see. Thank you.